This is Hovey Smith, the Backyard Sportsman. And today I'm talking to people who are working on their books or thinking about doing a book, which is a logical thing to do if you're in the selling knowledge business, because it's awful good to have a published book that you can refer to and sell on the back table to the lecture halls after you finish talking and you're doing your little bit on stage. Yes, sir. So, considering it's desirable to write a book, there are people who will help you. And I've recently been in contact with Paul Brodie, who has a radio show, a podcast radio show, particularly for authors. And the title of the show is Get Published. So he interviews authors and he gives tips on how to get published and get your book out there in the world where everybody, you assume, wants it to be. And he has an unusual show. Now, all radio shows should be formatted. That is, they should have the same elements in it, so a person going to the radio show can expect about the same thing every time he tunes in. And he does this very rigorously. In fact, when he interviews an author, he asks 5 questions. They are always the same 5 questions. Well, hopefully the authors will provide different answers. And the usual thing to do is he goes in and he has an introductory line. And it says, "Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Get Published Podcast, which we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today we're being joined by William Hovey Smith, me, author of Make Your Own Job Anytime, Anywhere, at Any Age." Of course, now you don't see it, but that's what you hear. And then he asks his first of his 5 questions. What is the one piece of advice that you would give a first-time author who is currently writing their book? Well, the first piece of advice I would give is finish it, guys. Yeah. You really need to finish your book. It's intimidating enough to start one or to think you can write one, but when you get down into the nitty-gritty of putting words on paper, finish the thing. And that's where many would-be authors fail. They get about, somewhere about 1/3 in. And then they say, this is really not worth very much. It's taking a lot of time. There's a tremendous number of errors in it. I'm going to have to go back and correct it, and that's going to be like pulling teeth, and so on and so on and so on, and maybe my time would be better spent doing something else and give this mess up altogether. Well, don't do it. Go ahead and finish your book. Now, it's intimidating when you get into a novel like this that's 400 pages long to get all the way through it. How do you manage to do that? Well, you pick a topic that you are passionately interested in, that you think is significant to put out there in the world. Otherwise, why do a book? If it's not significant to you, it's probably not going to be significant to your reader. So, okay, something significant gets out the door in the end. But once you get started, you get it outlined, you get it written, and then you go back and you rewrite. The real craft of book writing is not rushing through it and getting all through it and getting your 400 pages done. It is in the rewriting. It is into making it a really readable book that people enjoy reading. Now, if you want to read a non-readable book that is a first draft of a novel, I got one. You can buy this first draft off Amazon this very evening. Yes, sir, you can. And it's full of errors, just like any first draft is. So look at mine. Well, that's really terrible. And think you can do better, and you certainly can. All right? So finish your book. Now, with that tirade, we have extended his whole entire radio show. So we will do likewise with his other points. 2. What do you feel is the hardest part about getting published? Well, that used to be finding a publisher. But these days, you can self-publish. Now, there are many agencies who will assist you in finding a publisher, they say. Well, some of them are worth having, and many, many, many are not. But you can go to places like bookbaby.com, Author House, Boker, the people who do ISBNs, Spark Ingram, and they have programs for beginning authors to help you get your book out there in decent shape and actually published on the commercial market. So they will publish your book for you. Now, I have my own company, my own imprint, Whitehall Press, and they publish my books. Some of them. Not all, but some. Some my books I have sold to commercial publishers. Practical Bow Fishing, for example, this one, was sold to a commercial publisher early on. So, if you think you cannot get a publisher, you can, and the publisher is you. You'll have to shell out some money and you'll have to get it done. Okay, how much is this going to take? Well, depending on the amount of work you contract out, it can run into some few $1,000s. So, okay, you have a 400-page book, and it's going to take you $3,000, $4,000 to get it published, depending on whether you have illustrations in it or not, what kind of formats you use, what kind of paper, and blah, 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 and blah, 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 blah. And so you have cash money invested in your book. Now, so that's the toughest part in getting it published. Deciding if you can attract a commercial publisher. It's more and more difficult to do. It's more and more difficult to get in contact with agents. But if you can make these connections, yeah, sure, go ahead and do it. You'll not make as much money from that as you would have had you, say, published yourself and had your book been a reasonable or even modest success. Because the royalties you get from commercial publishers are terrible. And your book really has to be a best-selling book to make any real amount of money. So don't expect to get rich from book writing. A few people do, actually. But many, 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 many more do not. It is entirely possible to write yourself into poverty. All right, so you want to avoid that. You picked a good title. You think it's going to sell. You write it well. You prepare it well. And you publish it. Okay. So that's step number 2 and question number 2. Please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launch that worked well. Well, the best way to launch a book is to do it in a multiplicity of platforms simultaneously. And that's what I suggest. Now, I do also YouTube videos. I've got 850 of them out right now. All right. I do launch my books on a video platform. I just did a video about this book yesterday. Now, I also have a blog about it. I also do things like, I also contact radio stations, TV stations, local newspapers, see if I can get some speaking gigs where I can promote the book, and use several platforms to try to work and launch the book. Now, if you have a large extended family, of course you want your family members to buy the book. Yeah. And give you good book reviews on Amazon. The book reviews count. If you have a book and it takes years and years to get a few reviews out there, most people, unless they really know you, probably won't pay it too much attention. But if you manage to get 50 or 60 reviews, wow, that means a lot of people have really liked the book. So, you solicit reviews. First off from your friends and relatives, and then from other readers. And that's one way you build up buzz about your book, and you encourage them to go ahead and recommend it to others. Also, on a book like Make Your Own Job, this is a generally useful book that ought to be in every library in the country. And you ask your fans to actually buy a few copies and donate it to where it needs to be read by people who are presently unemployed among the 16 million that are. There are people who desperately need to read this book. So buy it for them, put it in a place where they can get at it. That's a reasonable and Christian, quite frankly, thing to do. Help your fellow man. And so these are among the ways that you can help promote your book. What is your favorite book, and what was the #1 thing you learned from it? Well, I have a couple of favorite books that were very influential on me, and both actually date from my childhood. One is Jules Verne's Mysterious Island, written by a Frenchman in the 1880s. Wow. This was a remarkable book in its day. And for a kid growing up in high school, it was a remarkable book when it was read, and it still is. And what did I learn from this book? I learned how to do characters that should be distinctive, well-defined, and also how to tell an interesting story and bring a lot of science and other information into the story. This was something that Verne pioneered and really did good at it, and that was one of the reasons his book sold so well in the day and sells so well now. He went on really adventurous, far-reaching journeys. His science was not particularly good in some cases, but he used the tools he thought existed in the day. And he made it happen in fiction. Well, fiction in Jules Verne's fiction has now become fact. Not doing it exactly the same way. But yes, now we have men on the moon. Now we have men walking on the seafloor. Now we have submarines. So all of these things have occurred. And he foresaw them. Okay, what's next? My next favorite book, read when I was early teens, was Micheners Hawaii. Now, Micheners Hawaii is a huge book. It's about this thick. It's 1,000 pages or so. It's a novel that would have problems today just because of its sheer length. But in the day that that book was written, people really loved to read. And they loved to get information about people and places that they considered exotic. And Michener was an absolute artist in building up his situations, making his settings, telling you about them in excruciating detail, but keeping it all interesting at the same time. So when you read one of Michener's books, you not only read a fictional plot that goes bang, 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 has a conclusion and an ending, you learned a lot along the way. That impressed me. And that's what I have also done in my novel, Father of the Grooms. I have added a lot of useful information about the setting, which is in Sicily, and about the mechanics of doing a lot of things, like hunting a wild boar with a flintlock musket, something I will do. I killed a deer with it. I haven't got a boar yet, but I'm working on it. So, these are the books, and these are what I've learned from them. What is your favorite quote and why? My favorite quote is one that I derived myself. And that quote is, "There is nothing in human experience that cannot be turned to profit by an inventive mind." And I mean that quite literally. Anything you see people do, anything done to you, anything done for you or about you, there's a story in there. There are people who want to do whatever it is or not do it, depending on what it is. And there is money in teaching, telling, or implementing the process of the doing. It might be an invention. It might be knowledge. It might be advice. It might be directed towards helping others in a non-profit organization. But look around you and observe. What do people need? How can you help them get it? You answer those questions, and you can write a book. If you can't answer those questions, then maybe you should choose another subject. And that would conclude the subject matter in Brodie's interview. He would ask usually one parting question. What is the best way do people find you online? Which indicates, yes, you need to have an online presence if you do not. And it should be simple, it should be identifiable, and probably should incorporate your name. So if you want to find me, you go to www.WM, the abbreviation for William, HoveySmith.com. Whoa, WilliamHoveySmith.com. Simple enough. So choose your names carefully when you do your online setups. Don't call yourself the Flaming Saucer or any such thing, but be practical about what you name yourself unless you are actually selling saucers. Well, of course you could. There's a market for saucers, not from me, but some people really like them and like to collect them. I recommend Brodie's podcast radio show. And you can look for it and you can find it online and you can hear it any day. And you'll hear a bunch of authors, a whole variety of them, writing in a whole bunch of different genres, replying to exactly these same questions. But again, yes, writing a book is important if you have significant things to say. So go ahead, write your book, publish it, or get it published. Publicize it, sell it, and do some good in the world. This is Hovey Smith, reminding you to hunt what you eat and eat what you hunt. Be legal, be ethical, be safe. Goodbye, God bless, and see you next time. And go ahead and write that book.